Good morning, church. Oh, that was a little subdued. Good morning, church. All right, that sounds more like game day. Glad to see you all. Good to be here with you. Man, God is at work, yeah? God is doing stuff in this valley, and sometimes, man, if we're not part of it, we're going to be watching it from the outside, you know? And so I just want to encourage you, be part of what God is up to in this valley, because it's going to take off, and he's going to do great things, and we can be part of it or we can be spectators, right? But we're called to be players. We're called to be people in the game doing things for Jesus. So that's just a bit of encouragement. But how many of you, I'm just going to jump in. We're jumping into a brand new series today, and it's titled Follower. All right, follower. How many of you guys have ever followed somebody somewhere before? Anybody ever done that? Like, especially like they're driving and you're driving. How many of you have ever followed somebody somewhere where you've been before? You guys ever do that before? And then inevitably they take like an exit you weren't expecting, or they have a back way that they know. You guys ever have that happen to you? Like, you know where you're supposed to be going, but they take a different, unexpected direction. Isn't that sometimes frustrating? Because you know that if you would have went your way, you could have still gotten there. You probably would have gotten there faster, or you could have been there and everything would have been all right. But right now, if you lose them, you're kind of lost. You guys ever had that happen to you before? Listen, there's consequences to following somebody or something, because you're going to end up where those things that you are following are going. Does that make sense? And if they go somewhere you don't like, if they go somewhere that ends up in a place you can't navigate back from, there are real consequences. So listen, we need to be mindful of what it is we choose to follow. And in this series, what we're going to do is we're going to be looking at instances throughout the New Testament in Jesus' ministry where he tells people to follow his direction, to follow his way of doing things, following his behavior, his thinking, his actions. Because listen, somewhere throughout history, I don't know, somehow through the years, it seems that the emphasis in church has become less about actually following Jesus and somehow just not upsetting Jesus. You guys know what I'm talking about? It's become more about just looking the part. It's kind of like a giant game of Simon Says, but with Jesus. You know what I mean? Like, Jesus says, don't do this. Jesus says, don't watch that. Jesus says, you better not date her. Jesus says, you better vote this way. Jesus says, you better look like this. You better act like this. You better think like this. And it's created this whole society of people who just kind of sit back and they throw stones at other people who aren't very good at playing Jesus Says. You guys see that happening in society right now, right? There's groups of people throwing rocks at other people who are not good at playing the game of Jesus Says, right? Jesus says you better not date her. Jesus says you better show up on time. Jesus says you better go to church. Jesus says you better be nice. And if you're like me, what happens is one day you'll look around and you'll realize, I'm not very good at playing this game. I'm not very good at playing Jesus Says. Because here's the thing, the times that I have found I get good at playing Jesus Says, you know what happens to me? I start judging other people for not being good at playing the game. And I start saying, Jesus says you shouldn't have worn that. Jesus said you shouldn't have gone there. Jesus says you shouldn't have said that. And I start passing judgment on people because they're not as far along on the following journey as I am. And I start criticizing people not because they aren't trying, but I start criticizing people in their weakness, which, by the way, can I just tell you, is like the antithesis of the ministry of Jesus. And if we do that and we start thinking that way, what happens is we miss out kind of on the central reason Jesus came to this earth and the central reason Jesus started his ministry. And I think when we miss this, we find the reason so many young people are walking away from faith and so many people have hit the eject button when it comes to church. It's because they fall, or people all around them fall, for this idea that church is about how good you are, about how good I am at keeping all the rules, about how good I am at following all the Jesus Says directions. But listen, Jesus didn't come to earth to make sure we were good. If Jesus came to make sure that we're good, can I just say he did a really bad job? Because I don't know all of you all that well, but I know you well enough to say, y'all aren't that good, right? Especially Larry. I mean, we're all not that good. Like, listen, we all have our stuff. We all have our hang-ups. We all have the things that if people could really see what was going on inside our hearts, the thoughts we really said, the words we almost said, but at the last minute we pulled back. If people could see who we really were, what they would see is we're not very good at playing Jesus Says, right? See, Jesus came to create a new kind of relationship with creation and the Creator. to bridge that gap where we could never be good enough, where we could never earn that relationship. And he says, listen, I want a relationship that's marked by pursuit instead of perfection. Because that's our calling. We're called to be in pursuit of relationship with Jesus. And so if we could just ditch all the stuff we knew about the Bible, if we could just ditch all the stuff we know about church, and we were just to read the 4 Gospels of the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and we were to read them for the first time, what you wouldn't find is Jesus reinforcing the 10 Commandments. And what you wouldn't find is Jesus walking around telling people they just didn't measure up and they weren't good enough. And what we wouldn't find is Jesus going around saying, you're not in, and you're not in, and you're not in. What you would find is Jesus walking around everywhere trying to show people how to make connection again with the Father. And he does it intentionally using relational terms. He says, God is our Father. And he's not saying that because he's Jesus' literal father. He's saying he's all of our Father. And sometimes we struggle with that because we might have had absentee dads, or we might have had not so good dads. We might have had maybe amazing dads. But we struggle sometimes with this idea that God is a father to us. But how much more relational can God be than like a father? Someone who corrects, who's concerned, who cares, right? He refers to himself, Jesus, as the vine. And he says, and you're the branches. And he says, listen, when you're connected to me in relationship, things are going to happen. You're going to start to bear a different kind of fruit. And we know that as the fruit of the Spirit, right? Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And over time, as we remain connected, can I just tell you, church, we should be becoming more like the one we say we're connected to. But the problem in the modern church is we're far more concerned about pursuing our politics and following people on social media than we are the God of the universe. And that has consequences. The fruit we start to bear does not look like the one we're following. It starts looking like the world that we live in. Jesus uses the illustration of sheep and a shepherd. And he says, listen, the sheep will know the shepherd's voice, which doesn't make sense because Alexa still doesn't understand my voice, right? She still doesn't know what I want her to do half the time. The sheep will know the shepherd's voice. How does that even happen? The shepherd and the sheep spend so much time together that the sheep just know his call. And the interesting thing, 2 actual whole herds can mix together, and all the shepherd has to do is call, and his flock will follow him. Listen, the point is this: Jesus is calling us into relationship with him and the God of the universe, but we somewhere, some way, we've confused this relationship with regulation, and we've traded relationship for religion. And can I just tell you, that is problematic because that has a side effect. If we are following religion, it will always lead us to practice. It'll never lead us to change. Listen, following Jesus has nothing to do about information. It has everything to do with transformation. And if we're not being transformed by the information we're getting, can I just tell you, the information might not be worth it. So if this sounds like you, if it sounds like someone you know, if you've kind of fallen for this idea that maybe I should not be good enough, maybe I have shame, maybe I have guilt, like I haven't measured up and Jesus is upset with me and I've fallen short. If that's you, or you know somebody who's walked away from church and they said, you know what, I'm just so sick of everybody acting the part and acting. Can we just say this? Can we just check all the religious baggage at the door and stop acting the part? Can we just be men and women pursuing the God of the universe with all of our stuff? Listen, we all have it. But the more we act like we have it perfect, can I just tell you, the more we drive the world away. We have to be people showing what it looks like to be in messy pursuit of the God of the universe. That's our call. Not to be, and it's like, oh, light. There's no impurity in light. Yeah, right, that's Jesus. The light is supposed to shine through us, right? That's the biblical thing. Let your light shine, and that's the light of God in us. It's not us and our perfection, it's him and his. Listen, during this series, maybe we'll realize that maybe just maybe, we got something wrong. Or maybe we got something twisted. Or maybe we've been following the wrong thing. Or maybe we've become transformed by information that has created us to be more like the world we're living in instead of transformation, which is creating us to be more like the one we're supposed to be connected to. Because Jesus came so you and I could have a relationship with God of the universe, a connection to the vine, and hear the shepherd's voice in a way that would change us forever. And he did this with two words over and over and over again throughout the New Testament. He said, simply follow me. To the super rich, to the poor, to the super spiritual, to the spiritually lost, to the religious and the irreligious alike, he repeated these same two words, follow me. And it all starts in the New Testament book of Matthew. So if you want to turn there, that's where we're going to be this morning, in the book of Matthew. And you're going to find in the book of Matthew that it was written by a guy named, oddly enough, Matthew, right? And what's great about Matthew is this story is really all of our stories. Because Matthew was far away from the church. Matthew was far away from God. Matthew was far away from relationship with the God of the universe. But this story shows how God relates to those who are far away. So if you have your Bible this morning, we're going to be turning to Matthew chapter 9. If you have a paper Bible and you're not sure where Matthew's at, open it to the Bible to the center, hang a right. If you hit Mark, Luke, or John, you just went too far. All right, so we're going to be Matthew chapter 9. And this is Matthew writing his story. We're going to be starting in verse 9. And this is what he tells us happened. He said, as Jesus was going along, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at his tax collector's booth. So he said, hey, as Jesus was walking along, he saw me sitting in the tax collector's booth. And why was he sitting in the tax collector's booth? Because Matthew's a tax collector. I went to college for 4 years to learn that information, so that's for free, all right? Now, if you've studied history, you know that tax collectors have never had what you would call a good reputation. They don't have a good reputation even now. They're not the most popular people on the planet, but it was worse in Jesus' day because here's what would happen. Rome would bring people up from the Jewish population to go and extort taxes from their people to pay their oppressors. But it didn't just end there. See, they weren't just seen as traitors. They were seen as the scum of the earth. And the reason is because not only would they collect taxes for their oppressors, they would collect a little bit extra for themselves. That's how tax collectors made money. And so they would collect taxes for people who couldn't pay it and take a little bit extra off the top so they got paid as well. And they'd get wealthy on the back of the oppressed people, all in the name of Rome. And so they were considered the lowlife scum of the earth. And I want to put this like in today's context and something we would all have like a viral kind of visceral reaction to. Kind of like those guys that sell drugs to kids on the playground, like they're just like low-life scum of the earth, like people you want to take out back and, talk to for a minute, right? And so everybody would hate this guy. Everybody would despise Matthew. Everybody would not want anything to do with him because he was on the outside of society. And Jesus sees him. And Jesus could have said any number of things to Matthew, right? Jesus could have looked at Matthew and he could have given him a dirty look. He could have told him a parable that would have made him rethink all of his career choices, right? He could have said, wow, your mom must be proud of you. There's a lot of things he could have said to Matthew. But what he says is so telling, and it's telling for a couple of reasons. One, because it sets the stage for our relationship with Jesus. And two, we got to understand something. Jesus' real ministry hasn't even started yet, and the people he associates with is going to define who he is. So he is starting. There's a few people following around. He's got some good stuff to say, but the 12 disciples are not a thing. The crowds of people, the thousands coming to be fed and healed, that's not a thing yet. So this is the very beginning, and he is choosing to call Matthew. And he could have said anything, and it would have all been justified, but this is what he says. He says, follow me and be my disciple. No, hey, how are you? I'm getting some feedback going on here. Let's try this. Hold on a second. Technical difficulties. Blame Steve. So he walks up to Matthew, and there's no, hey, how are you? There's no, hey, do you like your job? And what Jesus does would stun everybody who's standing there. It probably stunned Matthew because it makes no sense. This guy is a respected religious teacher. Actually, give me the microphone. This guy is a respected religious teacher, and he comes and he calls Matthew to be one of his followers. And to the other people following Jesus already, this would have made no sense because they believe this guy's been sent by God, and he invites this guy? this guy to be one of the followers? I mean, if you're in the people of the group, you're like, hold up, Jesus. I'm not sure you actually know who this is. Like, I'm not sure you know what he does. I don't think this is the guy that you're looking for. There's got to be another option. There's got to be a better option. There's got to be any other option. But Jesus sees him there, looks at him and says, follow me. And look what Matthew tells us happened. He says, so I got up and followed him. That's it. That's how Matthew became a disciple. Now, notice what Jesus didn't say. He didn't say, hey, Matthew, if you get your act together, you can start following me. He didn't say, hey, Matthew, I want you to go out there and I want you to give all the money back you stole from everybody else and then come follow me. He didn't say, hey, I want you to go make amends and make everybody happy with you and go apologize on your knees. I want you to go do all that. Hey, this is what I want you to do. I want you to go through the 6-month course, Matthew, and then you can come follow me. Hey, read this tract. Hey, pray this prayer. None of that happened. He said, follow me. And Matthew goes, so I did. And here's what happened at that moment. Jesus in that moment is now okay with being identified as hanging out with tax collectors and sinners and the dregs of society. But in that moment, Matthew's status is elevated. He's now known as someone who hangs out with Jesus, a respected rabbi, right? And that's huge for Matthew, and that's huge for us. Here's why. In the moment Matthew decided to follow Jesus, I don't think he changed all that much, right? He didn't suddenly become liked. He didn't become perfect. He wasn't like a saint, right? He's still considered the scum of the earth by every Jewish person on the planet. He didn't look perfect. He didn't act perfect. But he chose pursuit and connection. And that connection to the one Matthew chose to follow had implications and ramifications for his life. It changed everything for him. It wasn't based on how good he was. It wasn't based on how much of the Bible he had memorized. Look, both those are good things, but we are not saved by biblical memorization. We are not made closer to Jesus by how much of the Bible we can recite. I don't know if you guys paid attention in Scripture, but the devil actually knows Scripture as well. Like, it doesn't save you to know more Scripture. Like, we sometimes pursue religious exercise instead of pursuit of relationship. It wasn't based on how often he went to church or how often he prayed, which was probably never. It was simply an invitation to follow. And it's the same invitation that you and I all have as well. So what if over the next several weeks through this series, we left the religious baggage at the door? What if we said, instead of getting all hung up on trying to look the part, what if I just got really serious about being a follower, about pressing in, about becoming more like the one I say I'm connected to? Not that I'm perfect, but I'm trying to become closer to the one who is, right? And listen, if that seems simple, it's okay. It seemed too simple to the religious people of Jesus' day too. It's funny because we don't have to wait long to see how they reacted to Matthew becoming one of his followers. To see how they react to Matthew being able to spend time with Jesus and the kind of the hubbub and commotion that it created. Here's what Matthew tells us happened later, verse 10. He said, later I invited Jesus and his disciples to my home as dinner guests, along with many tax collectors and other disreputable sinners. Matthew decides to invite Jesus over for a dinner party with him and his friends. Now, if you're a tax collector, you don't have many friends, right? And the friends that you have are probably other tax collectors and other disreputable folks who are probably on the dregs and the outskirts of society, right? So you don't have respectable people. And going to someone's house as a respected teacher shows them honor. So Matthew says, hey, would you do me the honor of coming over and having dinner? Now, if you're one of Jesus' disciples, the answer to this question is an absolute no. There's no way. But Jesus accepts the invitation, and the disciples are like, man, couldn't we just go to Applebee's or something? Like, get tables that are across from each other so we're kind of together but not really together? Right? Because now, Jesus, you're showing honor to this sinner. You're showing honor to this traitor. You're showing honor to this person that is absolutely dishonorable. You want us to go and have dinner with him and his buddies? Are you sure? And the thing we see about Jesus over and over and over again is that he's so extremely comfortable hanging out with people that the religious folks of the day wouldn't. He's so extremely comfortable spending time and being with people that he was told, would be told, you shouldn't do that because it makes you disreputable because of them. Because in that day and age, you are made sinful by the things you were around. It's not about your actions, it's just being in proximity. Touching the wrong thing can make you unclean. And this fact that Jesus is trying to create connection, to start a whole new thing, is lost on the religious people who apparently are following Jesus around. Because they see Jesus go to Matthew's house and they kind of wait around for one of his disciples to come out. And they go, hey, tell us what's going on here. See, because verse 11, when the Pharisees saw this, they asked his disciples, why does your teacher eat with such scum? Right? See, they followed Jesus around, but they wouldn't have followed him into Matthew's house because the house is unclean, right? The house would ruin their reputation. Let me tell you something specific. Their religion would not allow them to follow Jesus. And that's a hard thing to hear. So they wait for one of Jesus' disciples to pop out, and they ask the question, why on earth does he hang out with such scum? In other words, why on earth is he hanging out with them when he could be hanging out with us? Right? We're reputable, good people. Why would he spend so much time with people who have intentionally chosen to do the wrong things? And apparently Jesus overhears this conversation with the disciples, or somehow the disciples tell him the message, but he responds by saying this. He says, healthy people don't need a doctor. Sick people do. Jesus is saying, see these guys? They know they're sick, right? You don't. You don't see a need for me. They do. So that's why I'm spending time with them. My time with you would be wasted. So I'm spending time with these guys because it's actually going to move the needle. It's actually going to make a difference. It's actually going to cause some sort of momentum. See, sometimes they get so busy telling everybody what to do that they forget that they should be doing it themselves. It's the game of Jesus says over and over again. Jesus said, I didn't come for the healthy. I came for the sick. And then look what he says next. He says, now go learn the meaning of this scripture. I want you to show mercy, not offer sacrifices. For I've come to call not those who think they are righteous, but those who know they are sinners. This would have ticked the Pharisees off, just so you guys know, because if there's one thing they do know, that's scripture. They know what the Bible says. So Jesus says, go learn the meaning of this. Go figure this out, because you obviously have missed something along the way. And he quotes a verse from Hosea. He said, I'm not come to call those who think they're righteous. I'm not come to those who think they have it all together. I haven't come for those who love to play the Jesus says games. No, I've come to those who are sinners. I've come to build relationship with those that know they need me. And here's why Jesus makes this point. Because none of us are as good as we look on Sunday or on social media. None of us. Man, we have bad days all through the week. And can I just tell you, it's okay. It doesn't make you less of a follower. It doesn't make you less of a person pursuing Jesus. It makes you imperfect. It makes you in need of a Savior. And that's the thing. Sometimes we get so caught up in our pursuit of perfection that we don't press into our need for correction. We don't pursue the need for Jesus to come in and help us change. See, it's easy to get so wrapped up and engrossed in looking the part that we make it impossible for everybody else to enter our exclusive club. And can I just tell you, that's heartbreaking. See, when we forget that Jesus came for the sick, it's easy to fall in the trap of thinking, if you changed, God could really do something. If you would just stop doing these things, man, God could really use you. And people are so guilty of doing this. We tell people who are sick, if you weren't so sick, God could actually use you. And God's saying, that's who I came for. Our message is supposed to be to the sick. And it's not to remind them that they're sick. It's to remind them that there's hope. But sometimes as followers, we get it wrong and we go, Jesus says you're sick. No kidding. The world is sick. It's separated from the God of the universe. Of course it's sick. Of course it looks different. Of course it's off. See, our job is to come alongside and say, follow what I'm following. Just pursue him and watch what happens. Because the sick become well. See, When we start thinking and we start playing the Jesus says games, we stop really being a follower and we really start becoming a Pharisee. And that's hard to hear. And I know this is probably not the most popular sermon I've ever preached. But can I just tell you, the worst thing we can do in the modern church is continue this attitude that we're better than the world. We're not. We're better off, but we're not better. We have a God that's good, but we're not gooder. Right? The divorce rate in the modern church is the same as the world. We love to think that somehow we've got an edge on everything, but we don't. And instead of saying, listen, we're sick too, in need of a Savior, we go, you're sick. You have a problem. You know, you're separated from God. And they're like, yeah, I get it. Why would I ever be connected? Because I look just like you. I've told you guys, we might be the only look into the four walls of the church someone ever gets. What are we saying to the world that we live in? What are we saying about the God that we follow? See, if we're not mindful, we could be like the ones in the story on the outside looking in, not getting what Jesus is up to. Here's the thing. Religion always places us on the outside of what Jesus is up to. Religion, and you guys might be like, Scott, you're splitting hairs here. You know, yeah, of course Christianity is a religion. You know that, right? Yes, it's a religion. But can I just tell you, we're not called to be religious. We're called to be followers. Christianity is not a religious exercise. It's not a mental exercise. It's transformation. See, too often people forget that Jesus called many of his followers with simple two words. Follow me. Just get up. Did Matthew have to change his friends? No. We say, you need to change your friends. You need to stop listening to that music. You stop doing all this. If you want to follow Jesus, you need to stop doing all that stuff. Listen, that's Jesus' job. We get it wrong. We try to convict the world, and that's the Holy Spirit's job. Our job is to come along and say, hey, I want to invite you to follow the one I'm following because it's changed my life. See, I was sick, but now I'm getting better. I'm not healed because I'm still a sinner in need of grace. Listen, none of us are as loving as we could be, as forgiving as we should be, as gracious as we ought to be, as generous as we're called to be. None of us. So why is it that we play the Jesus says game when we're just as bad off? See, listen, being a follower, it's not about us. It's about the one we're following. And it means we act, think, and do the way he would act, think, and do. It means that we enter in these situations and instead of bringing conviction, we bring hope. We come in these situations and we say, listen, the story's not over. There's still a lot more chapters to be written. Listen, just start following, which is what this series is going to be about. Over and over and over again, Jesus drops these hard truths of what it means to be a follower, to turn toward relationship with God. Listen, he's the good shepherd. He's the vine. He's a good father. And connecting to him changes who we are. Not overnight. Not in a minute. Listen, you're not going to become a Christian and all of a sudden you're not angry anymore. It could happen if you're healed, but I'm just saying usually. But we tell everybody you got to be this tall to ride this ride. Right? You got to do all these things right if you want to be in relationship with Jesus. And that's not what we see in Scripture. Over and over and over, Jesus comes to the broken, to the outcast, and to those on the edge of society to show us his love for this world. That's our call, to be that same light in darkness. Because as we're connected to the vine, the fruit we produce will change. We change. So church, I want to pray for you this morning. Lord, for all of us who fall in the trap of playing Jesus says, Lord, for all of us who, because of that game, we live in shame and we walk in shame and we walk in guilt and we don't feel like we should be at church and we don't feel like anybody can see the real us and who we are and all of our stuff. For those of us who have been playing that game, Lord, can it just be cast off as we press after you? Lord, you've called us to be followers. You've called us to press into a relationship. You've called us to more and more and more. Lord, you've never called us to perfect. Lord, for those of us that have that oppression, that have that doubt of whether or not you love us, can that just be washed away? Can all of our religious baggage be left at the door as we pursue you and push into the relationship you called us to? Lord, thank you. Thank you for the gift of your follower, Matthew, so that we can see that even those of us that are far, far away can be brought close again, can be invited into a relationship. Lord, these are hard truths. But Lord, it's worth it. So God, this morning as we sing about your goodness, can we be reminded that it's not about ours? That it's not about how awesome we are, but it's about how awesome you are. Would you show up as we worship your name? In your name. Amen. Let's stand.